slides.
Fantastic.
So
I'm going to start letting everyone in.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Looking forward to a fantastic conversation this afternoon.
Likewise.
Yeah. As we let everyone in, I mean, for those of you that are already on the channel, maybe just a quick hello, maybe say, what are you excited to learn about, or maybe a little background on yourself and who you are, or we just want to make sure that everything we cover today is as fascinating and as useful as possible to those that are on the channel today. Yeah, feel free to just type in the chat as we get started.
Stratos, do you want to go first, or can I start?
You can start, Alex.
Oh, sure. So, well, while we're waiting, and please, tell me when to start the presentation. But so my name is Alex Shavrankov, and I'm the founder and CEO of two companies, actually. So one is called Insilico Medicine, which I'm going to be presenting today and talking about AI for drug discovery. And the other one is called Deep Longevity, which is focusing on human health and human productive longevity, so lifespan. That's the topic I am deeply passionate about. And since you wanted to talk about something exciting, I'm always willing to talk about how to extend human longevity, because regardless of how you look at health, and regardless of how you look at the pharmaceutical business, at the end of the day, it is the number of productive life years that matters. So, and our goal is to establish the platform to create the maximum number of healthy, productive years for everybody on the planet. So that's my personal goal. And if you look at my research papers, you'll see a lot of work in aging biomarkers. So we now track the rate of aging. We look at ways to use AI to identify features that kind of tend to make you older and drive the aging processes. And we look for additional tools to help us understand human aging better. And based in Hong Kong, but truly global. So that's kind of the intro with a twist. And I'll pass the word to Stratos if we're still waiting for people to join. Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Alex. So my name is Stratos. Actually, currently I work as manager for the AI lab in Hospital Authority, Hong Kong Hospital Authority, and also for the data collaboration lab. So basically, what I love most, actually, I'm working in imaging, medical imaging, and generally AI. But of course, recently I focused more on the medical. And I mean, my passion and what I like is, and the reason I joined Hospital Authority recently is because I want to convert basically all the technology into clinical value. So that's going to be also my talk today. I will try to see how we don't actually put ourselves too much into making models and rather move forward into adopting the models. So that's my purpose for the next years. And that's what I want to push during my talk and during my presentation. So that will be all from my side.
Excellent. Fantastic. As we get started, I'll just do a quick introduction as well. Hi, everyone. My name is Levine Himlani. I am the founder and CEO of Accelerate. We are an edtech company that pushes workforces forward with education by upskilling governments, upskilling enterprises, and upskilling societies at scale so that they can harness a better future by learning skills and applying skills to areas like artificial intelligence and blockchain and fintech. And recently, we've started working with a lot of biotech companies as well to upskill their workforces so that they can take advantage of a brighter workforce and a more talent-equipped workforce. And the future looks so exciting in this area, and so we're really excited to push workforces forward at scale. We really believe in education's ability to enable better lives and try and inspire people to use these technologies, you know. So often it's not at the enterprise or the government level or at the societal level a question of the technology itself, but also the people who know how to use them and who are inspired to use them to solve society's greatest challenges. So yeah, that's what gets us excited every day. I think it's 2:05, so why don't we get started? Hello, everyone. Very excited to have many of you from all over the world joining our panel. I'm absolutely delighted to have two esteemed guests who will be doing a 10 to 15 minute keynote presentation. And then at around 2:30, would be delighted to open up into a panel. I have a few questions, but along the sort of next 20 to 30 minutes, it would be great to have a number of you ask questions on the chat, and I will try and relay those into the panel part, as well as a open Q&A towards the end of our hour and 15 minutes together. For those of you that do need to drop off or want to see a recording of this, this will be published on the Accelerate YouTube channel, and we'll also email the recording and the link out on the EDM where you guys signed up. So with that in mind, I would like to invite Alex, aka Dr. Z, because I can't pronounce his last name, to start with his keynote.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this wonderful panel and wonderful event. And I would like to actually thank Stratos for introducing me to that wonderful initiative. I will share my screen so you can see my presentation. And just give me 1 second, and I'll do that. And let me know if it works for you.
Fantastic.
Perfect. So my name is Alex Javrankov. I'm the founder and CEO of Insilico Medicine. It's a company focused on drug discovery and drug development. And we're applying next generation artificial intelligence to pretty much every area of pharmaceutical R&D. I'll tell you a little bit about our company, and then I'll kind of talk about some of the trends. So in Insilico, we are actually, I'm dialing in from Hong Kong, so I'm based in Hong Kong, and our headquarters is in Hong Kong. But we were established in Maryland in 2014. We currently are about 120 people worldwide. 80 of us are AI scientists. Primarily hired, the way we hire is usually through competitions and hackathons. Usually it's a national event, and we pick top 2, top 3 people in AI, and afterward we train them over several years in biotech. And we specialize in target discovery using multi-omics data. We also generate novel molecules using AI. Our strengths are in generative adversarial networks. I very briefly will cover the stack, and deep reinforcement learning. We published a very large number of papers, so we're very academically minded, over 100 peer-reviewed research papers as Insilico, and maybe over 250 as an extended group. We are usually the originator of core IP in the space, and some of our work that we performed in 2016 was recently highlighted as the MIT Technology Review's top 10 breakthroughs of 2020. What we are in a nutshell is essentially we synthesize biological data and chemical data using GANs, and generative adversarial networks and reinforcement learning essentially allows us to tap into pretty much every field of pharmaceutical R&D. And we try to link biology, chemistry, and digital medicine. So we do target discovery, generative chemistry, virtual screening and annotation, and clinical trials and outcomes prediction. I'll explain what those are for some of you who are not familiar with the field. What we do is we are kind of an yin-yang of software and internal drug development, drug discovery, drug development. So we develop AI for generation of novel molecules and for discovery of novel targets. But we at the same time use that AI
Are you
internally.
listening to this conference or no? 应该没有在听吧?
Guys, somebody's not muted.
Let's keep going. For those who are not on mute, please keep mute.
Yeah. So we also work on internal pipeline to discover novel molecules and to push them into preclinical trials. For those of you that, who are not familiar with the pharmaceutical R&D, this is going to be one of the most important slides. I would say probably the most important slide in pharma. Even though the paper was published in 2010, you can actually refer to that. It's Nature Reviews Drug Discovery by Steve Paul. At that time, he was at Eli Lilly. So it shows you the different phases of drug discovery, drug development, and the process usually starts with a disease hypothesis. So you are trying to figure out which molecules, which pathways, which processes are driving the disease, because most of the diseases are still very poorly understood. So you identify a protein target, you try to narrow down to one or two biological targets, proteins usually, that you would want to hit, that you would want to inhibit, deactivate, or on the contrary, you want to activate them. And you're looking for a small molecule or an antibody or some other method for doing this. That process for target discovery may take you decades or sometimes months. The process for identification of this molecule that would hit this protein of interest to see if you can modulate the disease in one way or another, that process takes usually about a year plus. You can see on the bottom the probabilities of success and also the cycle time, so how long it takes to identify this molecule and to progress to the next stage. And you have a capitalized cost in millions. So it costs you 94 million to get the target to hit usually in big pharma. In small biotech, it's smaller. And then you progress further, hit to lead, 1.5 years, lead optimizations, 2 years, preclinical studies in mice, so toxicity, etc. You're preparing to go into humans. It's a year. And you can see that by the time you get to that stage, you spent about $500 million and over 5 years. So this process is extremely intense. And many of you who are asking, okay, why are we not there yet with COVID molecules? Well, the answer is simple, is that, regardless of what you use, AI or traditional methods, AI is a Ferrari. You get from 0 to 50 very quickly, but then you still have to move with the speed of traffic, and you still need to do those preclinical experiments. And then you get into the clinical stages. So phase 1, you test safety in humans. Phase 2, you test efficacy, and that's actually where you test whether your hypothesis in a human disease worked or not. So almost 10 years later, you will figure out whether the target that you picked up really works in humans or not. Is it really effective? And then you do a phase 3 study to see if safety and efficacy can be confirmed in larger subpopulation, patient population. So again, this process costs about $3 billion nowadays, takes you 10 years, and it's extremely complex. So what we are doing at Insilico, we are looking for ways to develop AI to tap pretty much into every phase of the pharmaceutical R&D. And link those together, because very few humans stay with a molecule as it gets developed from start to finish. So even that knowledge is lost. So AI can help you at least maintain that knowledge over those decades. And one really cool technology that all of you are probably already familiar with, but it's pretty recent in AI, it's called generative adversarial networks. And here is a very cool paper, not ours, that came around the summer of 2016, demonstrating this concept where you have a generator, deep neural network, which generates kind of meaningful noise in response to given parameters, textual input in this case, and there is a discriminator which looks whether the output of the generator is true or false. And those networks compete with each other. That's why it's called adversarial. And in the process, they learn to do this. Again, remember, this is 2016, and that was really hot back then. So you basically describe a picture. For example, this small bird has a pink breast and crown and black primaries and secondaries, and you get pictures like that, that essentially we can see that the direction of your thought is there. Some of the generation conditions are met. And later, you got much better quality of images, and we got to deep fakes, right? So people who do not exist, and it's very difficult to even differentiate those people from real people in the world, right? And you can either generate with generic conditions, basically ask for, you know, a white male with specific features of specific age, and the network will give you a bunch of those. Or you can use a template and say, okay, well, give me a Brad Pitt who is, you know, 70, Asian, and female, and you would be able to get some features from Brad Pitt. This is the history of, you know, deep learning in general on the top. So neural nets is not a new concept, but GANs is a new concept. And we decided to start using GANs for generation of small molecules. We, of course, also do it for biologics. We do it for generation of synthetic data. So think about deep fakes, but on biological data. We were one of the first to publish. Actually, the first paper that I know in a peer-reviewed journal was ours, called Cornucopy of Meaningful Leads, that we submitted around the same time that this previous paper I showed you came out. On archive, we put it in a peer-reviewed journal, and we basically started thinking about, okay, can we give a bunch of generation conditions to a GAN to generate molecules with specific properties and for specific protein targets. Did a lot of theoretical work over the years, and then started experimenting. And unlike images, when you're doing it with molecules, you need to invent the molecule using GAN with specific properties, then you have to synthesize it, and then you need to test it. You need to test it on proteins in vitro, then you need to test it in cells, also in vitro, and then you need to test it in mice and then go human or, you know, larger animal. So this process takes a lot of time, and it's not just like looking at the image to see if the you know, if the generation conditions can be confirmed. So it's a very tedious process. And for us, this is kind of the timeline in generative chemistry that we took. So in 2015, we came up with the first concepts. 2017, we started kind of bridging generative and also predictive models. So we generate, and then we also filter down to narrow down to a specific number of molecules. 2019, we built 30 of those models and validated experimentally. And in 2020, we got it to work to the level where we decided to also productize. So we use it internally for programs, but since we use it very rarely, I mean, comparatively rarely, so you can use it maybe once a month, we decided to also sell it to the others so they get the same advantage. And one really cool paper we published in 2019 that went viral, we published a few of those, but this one was somehow highlighted. So we showed that if we get a protein target from a partner, for example, in just 46 days, we can generate new novel molecules and validate experimentally all the way into mice. So the processes that took much longer before can be done by, you know, naive people like us who do not have that medicinal chemistry experience, which is very rare. An experimental experience, we could just do it in 2 months with AI. So that was pretty cool. And now we are productizing this as a platform end-to-end. So we have Pandomics, which we just launched, and we're going to be launching in Asia. So follow us. In Hong Kong, you can actually come and visit us when we launch. It's a system which allows you to solve diseases very quickly, to basically use the data that's already in the system or put your own data in and identify some promising targets for a disease of interest. Then there is Chemistry 42, which allows you to generate novel chemicals, novel chemical matter. And in Insilico, that's currently available only for partnerships. There you basically can predict the outcomes of clinical trials. And we want to make it available for everybody, not just for big pharma. So the cost savings and time savings are immense. I'm not going to go into that, but you can see just visually that we save a lot of money and time by applying AI. And I can talk about this from experience because, again, we are discovering and developing those molecules. So I have a story that I will hopefully be able to tell at the end of the year. We used generative biology AI, so deep fakes on biological data, to identify completely novel anti-fibrotics. Fibrosis is a huge process also in aging. So aging is fibrosis, fibrosis is aging. And of course, fibrosis is implicated in many other diseases. So we identified novel targets, generated novel molecules for those targets, and now completed in vitro and vivo validation in multiple fibrotic diseases. So that's going to make history, hopefully. And we also are quite active in COVID. So for COVID, there is a C3-like main protease. It's a protein which is implicated in viral replication. We already are at sub 50 nanomolar in terms of activity for this protein. So identified hits, we're now optimizing. And now I just need to complete the animal experiments to see if it's effective in animals to be able to publish a high-profile paper. And of course, it's not curative at this point in time because you still need to do human experiments, etc. But it's very promising. And also, our work in aging will also contribute to COVID quite a bit because for fight against COVID, because this is a very gerolavic, so harmful to the elderly disease. And some of the work that we're doing in geroprotector is likely to be very positive for protection of the elderly. So the way we partner with people is we do clinical risk assessment and portfolio triage. So we actually work even with hedge funds now that try to predict the outcomes of phase 2 clinical trials for smaller biotechs, and then they make bets to trade on them because those companies are very sensitive to clinical trials outcomes. If something fails in phase 2, they go down 80%. If something goes, through phase 2, they go up the same. So we are working on that quite a bit and trying to perfect this system, even sometimes partnering for free. But the way we make money is, of course, we discover novel targets for big pharma. We sell software. We also do small molecule design. And the major value is, of course, in internal preclinical programs. So that's us. We have a solid business model and a very, very dedicated team. Again, I personally am very interested in aging and longevity and have another company which focuses on measuring aging. But Insilico is a flagship that is helping drive pharma R&D. So you can connect with me on WeChat, love the tool, and also on Twitter. We are at Hong Kong Science Park and very collaborative, very academically active, so would love to collaborate. And I encourage everybody to go into this field. There is space for more people. There are no competitors, only partners.
Alex, thank you so much for your presentation. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us. That was very insightful, and we're very much looking forward to asking you some more in-depth questions in the next stage of the panel. Brilliant work, brilliant work, and very excited to see more and more people and inspire more people to enter this space. Thank you again, Alex, and I'm going to put you on mute, and I'm going to pass the show to Dr. Stratos, aka Dr. Stratos, who will give us a short presentation as well. And then for all of you out there, please feel free to keep asking questions on the chat. After a short presentation, we'll be opening to Q&A and more of a panel discussion. So I really look forward to hearing from you all. It's so great to see so many people from all over the world chiming in.
All right, thanks Alex for the nice presentation, and thanks Lavin for the intro. So can you see my screen? Is it a full screen? Yes, it's okay. All right, so my name is Stratos. Actually, I'm a president manager in AI Lab Hospital Authority. So the topic I want to tackle today is about, is a good model enough? So what I mean by that, I mean basically if you have a good AI model, does this mean you have a clinical solution? So, and of course, the more I work on AI, the more I realize that the hype keeps going grower, but people still don't understand the capability of AI. So I think this gap keeps increasing every day. And one more gap that it keeps increasing is we have much more AI models every day, but we have the stable same number of adoptions. So this gap keeps increasing. It's very bad for the technology in the future. So that's what I want to tackle at the moment. And of course, I won't spend too much time in the slides, but why AI is now, as you know, it's GPUs, fast internet, the culture, investment, and media. But of course, I believe the culture is what brings AI become so popular. And of course, as I mentioned before, the deep learning models are becoming more and more every day. So we have to follow. So having said that, a very quick intro on AI. I mean, from go to cure, basically. So I want to say, like, I'm going to use this explanation. What's diagnosis? Diagnosis is the process of determining which disease explaining a person's symptoms. But on AI terms, if you think about it, what the doctor does is exactly what the AI can do. So basically, this sentence, the features are actually the person's symptoms, and diagnosis is the classification result of a machine learning model, for example. So the sentence here is actually can project it directly to what an AI can do. And of course, the symptoms or any kind of data can be the input to the system. And why healthcare now? I mean, the widespread of electronic health records, right now, everything is digitized, especially also in Hong Kong, and HA has done a great job about this. Genomic data is growing, improving computing power. And of course, the recent advances in LLP with BERT and BioBERT, and also basically the imaging part in computer vision is what really drives all this technology. But what I want to highlight here, usually we always come up to this. I mean, if you're a data scientist, if you're a clinician, want to adopt, or you're going to start a project. The question is, how do you choose a project? Are you going based on clinical significance, so the available data, rich publication list, doctor's accessibility, local clinical need, or personal expertise? How do you decide where to go forward? So there is no direct answer to that. You always, this is based on the experience of the AI engineer and the clinician on the field. So you need to make a decision of what you have most. You have more data, you have more access to doctors, then you could make the decision. So, but always you need to question that and ask this in the beginning. Another way to tackle that is basically questions to ensure the clinical value. So basically, does the mitigating action of therapy exist? This is very important. What is the follow-up action? And I will talk about this in the next slide. What is the ability to intervene, or who needs to take the action? What is the lead time? I mean, what lead time we offer by adding this AI? And what are the logistics and costs, the feasibility study? And what are the incentives of acting? Why a doctor should use AI? This is very important questions to ask in advance before you invest in very expensive resources of an AI engineer. So this slide that I found like in a Stanford, like a slidization recently, the very important part, like when you start the output of your AI model should always be connected to an action. You need to predefine the action, and you need to know who is the beneficiary. Is it like the doctor? Is it like the hospital staff? Is it basically the patient? Who will benefit from your model? And the action is going to be on operation side, or it's going to be a medical side. All this play a very important role, because sometimes I feel like data scientists and engineers focus a lot on building the model and don't pay too much attention in this part, which actually will later prove like is a waste of resources. But of course, nothing can be done. Actually, I love this slide because it's like kind of atlas of data, right? So structured and unstructured data. So on the right side, where I'm going to focus more today is like you see the unstructured data is about imaging, text, reports, even tweets and online media, everything that can represent some clinical application, some clinical information, sorry. But of course, structured data is also very valuable, more easy to handle, like lab results or blood tests, like anything that can be done from the patient. So at this stage, I will focus more on this unstructured data. But of course, you have to go down the road of starting collecting data from zero. I really like this slide, for example, shows all the steps from ethical approval, data access, querying the data. De-identification is a very important thing, going down the road, and quality control, and of course, label the data. I would say the majority of the time takes when you have to label data. So that's why, and back to the question before, how you choose a project, it's very important to know whether you have available data or not, or public data. And it's good because community is very open, as I mentioned before, right? So there's a lot work together to build a lot of public data. Of course, this slide is on imaging, and but there's a lot of public data. Try to see if you have data before you start each project available, because by data, it doesn't mean also the modality of the imaging, but also it means the labels, which means some people has put a lot of efforts of getting the doctors on board and ask them to label this data. That could give you a quick start before you start doing anything else. And the next stage is, of course, find the best annotations. Of course, you can have retrospective annotations, but as a way you go to prospective and actually ground truth. By ground truth, I mean like pathology. For example, if you have like a lung nodule and labeled by a doctor, you expect a specific accuracy. However, if you have like a biopsy and you know that the result, then basically you can have a more accurate model if you use as labels. So, but of course, it's not easy to collect, for example, biopsy results. However, it's much more easy. The volume is much bigger when you have annotation retrospectively by doctors, not while doing the job. And I will focus, what I want to highlight here today is, let's say I'll grab a model line. I will focus, for example, CT brain and on a classification model by computer vision. So many of you may have checked the Kaggle competition, an RSNA intracranial hemorrhage detection. So basically the model tries to load the CT image and try to give the score for one of these 5 different hemorrhages on each slide. To make it simply for you, it just gives a decision on each slide of the CT. So I don't know if you can ever do a CT, you go like to the clinic, sometimes the doctor still in Hong Kong, they print and they put the slide one by one sometimes in the private clinics. So maybe imagine the AI gives a score for each one of these. So the model would give us a decision about all this. What we need to check here is basically the distribution of the data set. This is the first thing we need to check. It's great that Kaggle and all these doctors or RSNA has put so much effort to label this data. If the data scientists look at this distribution, you will say, okay, so this is an imbalance problem we need to solve. So I will put all my efforts on basically try to solve this. But we all know that solving imbalance problem is not always successful and might take a lot of resources. For this one, how you can approach that. What I would advise is, for example, talk to the doctor, see, for example, the application. Do you need to, for example, to separate epidural through subdural, and then can you actually, these 2 classes convert into one? Is the doctor okay with that? So all I'm gonna say, instead of going down the road of investing resources directly of solving an imbalance problem, you can always approach this from the application perspective, talk more to the doctors and try to readjust your application. And of course, I use as example the second winner, which is a no-brainer team. And as you can see here, of course, I won't go into the details of the user next train on Instagram images, and then they use an LSTM to make a prediction for its slide. But people can go online and have the GitHub and check all the details about that. What I want to highlight here is like all the effort that has been done on the model. However, as you can see, you can grab a model and retrain it and have something that is working within actually 10 days. But the data collection and annotation might take months. So that's why, and then in the end, we cannot guarantee that the application will be successful. So what I want to say here, like by doing like this machine learning model, is it enough? I would say the AI model is maybe 20 or 30% of the whole product. So before we go directly cheering and be successful, I would say let's wait to make this happen. So and here I have another example by DeepMind where they managed to detect acute kidney injury based on electronic health records, basically on structured data, up to 14 hours before it occurred. The reason that I love this slide, and I always use it in my presentation, is because it compares on the upper part is basically the traditional clinical practice. As you can see how many more humans are involved in this and different levels, and everything takes much more time. As you can see on the lower part, which is actually the digital enable part, the AI is the first step. In order for this to make it happen, they have to design the application, they have to design some platform, they have to rearrange the best practice that the doctors use and all the clinical pipeline for this to make this value. This is what it proves here that the AI model might not be enough unless you support it with all the rest of the adjustments here. I have this slide, but maybe I won't spend time on this, but you can see it later. This slide is very cool, and I find it like from the Stanford course, because it says why they revisit why rule-based systems fail right now in clinical problems. As you can see, with recent advances in deep learning, some of the problems like many symptoms to many diseases ambiguity have been solved, or there's information rather than may be needed. But of course, interpretability is not here yet, and sometimes unable to recognize how one disease may influence presentation of a second. As you can see right now, AI is getting closer to what humans understand, but all the problems that are not being tackled still till today by humans, even AI cannot tackle. So that tells you a lot about about the AI capability. And of course, developing for AI project, as I said, like majority of the time is about data collection and annotation, and 20% maybe is product development, and we need a lot of time on product integration and trials. So you see the minimum of the time, so basically on the AI model and the development. And here I try to draw basically the AI cycle development. As you can see in the beginning, you just get a training, testing the model that we discussed. As you can see, we're still on the first stage. When we go to the pre-trial and test the algorithm, you need to readjust your cohort. You need to adjust your thresholding. So in retrospective study, you need to make it application close to what the application is. And then after you integrate it to the whole system, basically you need to check the accuracy, the connectivity, the user experience, and then move it to a prospective trial. And then keep monitoring the system, user experience, and everything till it's still after it's in production. So the job doesn't end by having a model. The job ends when the system is being used, is integrated and is being used successfully by the doctors. So I would say we're getting close to that. And a very important slide is like from a management perspective, you need to set up a cost per project, right? Don't spend too much money for increasing 1% because, you know, for AI models, I'm pretty sure a lot of you people know, you might reach an 85% quickly AUC. But for every 1% that you go after, you need to spend a lot of money and efforts. So make sure your management understands that. And what I propose here is like the minimum value model. So similar to the minimum value product. So avoid cargo stack development. Get a model quickly up and running, which is okay, and then put more efforts on the UX side. Because you need to, by a simple model, you don't gain the doctor's trust. The user experience needs to be as good as this. So sorry, I don't have the reference for this slide because I forgot it, but I think it was from Fast AI, but I apologize for that. So, and the validation beyond accuracy, basically what they need to satisfy is utility, feasibility, and the clinical impact. These are the three main points, according to Stanford, that we should satisfy and make sure when we go to a validation. Like all this happens after the model development. In simple words, like after you test the accuracy, the speed, and user experience, threshold selection is very important for the application. For example, if you have like a very nice balanced data set, like everything is like nicely, but when you apply this on a real environment, the numbers, the cohort numbers, and the ratio between sick and healthy people might change totally. So you need to test the model again and adjust it of what you want to achieve. The cohort customization, test on multiple hospitals, the generalization, different machines, and go back and update the model or adjust the user experience. This is an iterative process. So a big institution should be always have the infrastructure to keep monitoring the model. So it's an investment for the future. And very important, some people, it's not only the accuracy, right? We need to define other metrics to make this happen successful, like turnaround time or misdiagnosis rates or clicks per task, patients per hour. So these metrics actually is more interpretable, more easily understand by the doctors. That's where it shows the actual clinical value. The AUC is the first part, and but of course we need to go deeper into these metrics, and each application have its own metrics. So think out of the box for this to make it happen. And actually if you don't have the data, you can still do simulations, like a work we did, for example, together with Hong Kong U and inside a previous company. So basically we try to do a chest X-ray triaging system. So the system will scan all the chest X-rays, and we try to push at the front on day one, which ones are critical, like pneumothorax. So because we couldn't access hospital data at that time, we did a lot of simulation. And we proved based on the simulation that by using chest X-ray triage using AI, you can actually push and save around 12 days of average time for the critical cases. This means if somebody's has pneumothorax, needs to be treated right away. So this means the AI can help you spot that and quickly, because you know there's maybe a backlog for the doctors to check. It might take 1 to 2 days. So you're saving actually a life if you push it at the front. And of course, the integration with the CMS and the PACS needs to be seamless connection, and it needs to be user-friendly. This is very important points to follow. And the monitoring process is also very important. After you set up everything and after the trial, you still need to have some metrics to monitor that, what we call the relevance metrics. This means you need to monitor and see how the performance, the accuracy will drop, or basically the other methods that we designed previously will drop. So this have a revision every 6 months or a year to reassess and see whether the model has to go back on the first stage to be retrained and adjusted. And after you do all that, of course, you can achieve and making like full-time platforms like, different companies that have multiple function and multiple models. Sometimes these platforms, it's not only the design UI, might have like 3 or 4 different AI models for a doctor to make the job, because it's very important for a doctor. You cannot say, I detect one disease from a chest X-ray. This doesn't help. You need to make sure that you cover, because you don't want to use a platform just to check one thing. He wants to do quickly his job, so basically he needs to check the platform that can actually do his full job by using the platform. So we need to guarantee that. I'm not sure if you've heard about the DR, the diabetic retinopathy model by Google, which is actually highly advertised. But recently there was a paper by Google that basically they said that they tested the model in different clinics in Thailand, and they have they figure out that they were not performing as expected and won't be used as expected. And that was a surprise. And I mean, what some insights is like the nurse included deterring patient from participating in the prospective study for fear it will cause unnecessary hardship. Or patients are not concerned with accuracy, but how the experience will be. For the patients are like, should I have to go to the hospital? Should I waste my time? Or sometimes, for example, the image quality. Like when we train these models, usually the quality of the images is perfect. So sometimes when we go down to other rural areas, the performance might drop quickly. So that's what I call the generalization of the model is very important. And I'm glad Google put this out. And what I want to highlight here, actually, there's a lot of FDA approved products recently going out. But I would say, I think the ones that actually should be, I really trust are the ones that I believe should go forward, is the ones that you really solve a problem. So by chance saying that for a chest X-ray, for example, for pneumothorax detection, is a very specific problem, but you need to make it more clinically specific for this to be approved. That's my feeling until now. And the limitations, of course, as I said, generalization, scalability, data collection, annotation, cost of development is really high. You always need to keep it up and design in advance. The platform design, always use DevOps, AI, and medical expertise is rare. Build trust with doctors, and validation is hard. Spend time on your validation. I think the engineers, our data scientists should start putting more efforts into the validation part. So I think now is the time. And my answer is research is the key. Research always opens doors and builds trust. Use public data for proof of concept, work closely with doctors, and spend time in the trials. And of course, like small data in the future, I think Alex mentioned before, like data generation and data augmentation, dimension reduction. And of course, like very recently, other than GANs that Alex mentioned, self-supervised learning and active learning and online learning, all this kind of stuff that put human also in the loop, I believe it will play in the future. So from big data, now we go into small data and maintain the same accuracy. So here I have a slide that I want to say what is actually my feeling of how AI is going to be adapted to the next slides. So I believe in the first couple of years, 2021, we have use of AI in alerting and triaging, which basically is more on the back end. However, as we build trust with the doctors, I think the AI will come closer, move from operations, closer to the doctor side. We could be more recommending and co-diagnosing, which is actually the front line. So the next 5 years, I believe that will be the plan, how all the AI will be adopted. And of course, Geoffrey Hinton says they should stop training radiologists now. I don't want to put myself opposite to Hinton, but I'm just going to say here that I believe we should start training doctors or collaborating with AI rather than stop training doctors. And the answer to my question that I asked in the beginning is an accurate AI model will just lead to a good publication. You need to build around that, well validated, and put double the efforts after you have a good model to make it a success. And this is actually a challenge that we organize, although it's not the topic. I just want to say here that we organize a challenge for surgical instruments with the AI lab. So feel free to check it. There's some by Science Park actually, and we support that. So basically, feel free to check it. So I will close here. Thank you very much. Lavin, I cannot hear you.
Thank you, Dr. Stratos. Fantastic.
Also on time, right? Yes.
More or less.
More or less, a little bit more. Okay, I apologize for that.
No, not at all. Fantastic. So again, pleasure to have both you and Dr. Alex and Dr. Stratos here to give us your presentations. We have about 15-20 minutes to ask some questions to both of our esteemed panelists. I'd be happy to get started on some questions that I have, and then audience members, please feel free to add your questions on the chat as well. And yeah, looking forward to encouraging plenty of open-ended questions so that we can have a really thoughtful discussion today. So I guess one of the first things, coming from a non-scientific and non-biotech background, one of the questions I get asked a lot, and I'm sure some who are new to this space ask, is where to begin. You know, for those of us who are interested in biotech, who are interested in AI and healthcare as a career, and maybe some of us are college students, some of us are career switchers. Question to both Dr. Alex and Dr. Stratos, where do you think we can begin in terms of getting started and understanding how to enter this space?
Sure, Stratos, would you like to start or would you like me to go?
You can go, please, go ahead.
All right, so my recommendation would be to first get very familiar with the space, because of course there are no stupid questions, only stupid answers. But before you get into the space, it's very important to be quite familiar with it, right? So, for example, before you approach myself or Stratos for an internship or for some collaboration, etc., it's a good idea to do the background work and read the research papers, or at least see the direction. Look at a few conferences like this one. Take a few Coursera courses in data science to just to have a brief understanding of you know, where you're going. I must say that after you get familiar with the space, you understand who is doing what are our needs, what the needs are for the customers. You would be able to find home regardless of your actually prior occupation. So if you are, you know, a history student, or you study something else that doesn't have practical utility, you would be able to find, you know, a job in marketing or in outreach or in humanizing whatever we're doing. If you are a data scientist, we would teach you biology and chemistry, but you have to be very dedicated to this field, and you need to get familiar with the field and do your prior work. Then after you are ready, you can approach companies like ours for an internship, or look at the various positions that we have, and, you know, start low and then grow quickly. So that's my advice. Or just try to do something in this field yourself. So the best way to learn is to do it, right? So just try to solve a practical task. Take a course and try to get a product out. Do an app, do a website. Nowadays, those things are, you know, cheap or even free. So once you try it out, you can again come to us and find a way to work for us.
Fantastic. And Dr. Stratos, what are your advice to those people who are really excited about getting into this space but have limited knowledge?
Totally agree with Alex. First of all, you need to study the basics, understand a little bit the problem domain, what we say. So after, you need to put some effort. You know, you have to sit down some weekends, don't go for hiking, and study some paper, for example, or basically don't go to the beach, or you can study at the beach also, it's fine. But all I want to say is you need to understand. Yes, well, the beach is not open yet. So basically, all I want to say, you need to understand the domain specifically. And after you understand the domain, what I always advise is try to see how you can fit your skills in this domain to contribute. For me, that's very important because, of course, data science is very important and very cool, but there's so many fields that you can contribute in this technology. It's not only about data scientists. So if you're software engineers, DevOps, product managers, or like project managers, you have your own unique skills. Try to see how this will contribute in the field after you start it. So that's how I advise everybody. So don't try always to fit into some trend. Understand the problem and fit what you can do best in this technology. That's what I advise.
Yeah, I like what you and Dr. Alex were saying, where, you know, even if you're not in the hardcore machine learning part of this industry, it's still just as exciting to maybe be involved in the product management side, right? Even for your presentation, the algorithm itself can only really account for 20 to 30%. I mean, think about the actual application deployment to solve the end problem. That's also a design problem. That's also a simplicity of the design problem, a DevOps problem. Fantastic. So, you know, going back to maybe some of the people who are already in the space, let's say they've got a very strong biochemistry background, kind of like that slide you have where tons of people are trained in things like radiology or chemistry or biology. Dr. Alex and Dr. Stratos, what do you think are some of the major skills gaps? Like, what's stopping people who have the biochemical background, the domain knowledge, when trying to equip themselves with the more machine learning knowledge, the GAN knowledge, the data science knowledge, if at all? You know, do you see a skills gap that's holding the industry back?
Stratos, you start.
Yeah. So go first on this one. So basically, I think that first of all, I believe making a model right now has been very simple. So I think you can easily get the model. I think maybe not the skills is what holds people back. I think usually it's the data availability and basically the adoption, again, the integration part. So you can make a model, all right, you can have the skills. However, where are you going to land it? Because, you know, you cannot keep making models forever. You need to find a way to land it and get some feedback from the user. To me, it needs to be close to the user, and it needs to be, that's what can kill a momentum like this, as I said. So the data is another thing. So data and labels is another thing. So skill-wise, I think, of course, you need to catch up. There's so many things coming every month. And of course, like the AI community is, I mean, even changing. For example, now it was TensorFlow, now people changing more to PyTorch, for example. I mean, when I was working in the past, I mean, still remember when Torch was out, not PyTorch. So people would try to feel like, whoa, is using Lua. What's Lua, basically? So there's always some, you know, exciting things going on around that area. So I think you can get the excitement from that. But I think after some years, I think the skills you need to do is basically how this can be adopted, move a little bit more to reality. Because if no, it just becomes something fun for you. Doesn't become, for me, I think it's important. There's value when you're moving closer to the adoption of the application. So I would say what skills you can build around that, just try to put yourself into the user's perspective.
Got it. And my final question, sorry, Alex, Dr. Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree 100%. I just want to say that the diversity of skills is extremely important. So, you know, when I look at many problems that we are facing, I try to embrace the MMA philosophy. So, you know, mixed martial arts. You know, if you are just good at kicking or good at grappling or good at, boxing, you won't be able to compete with a martial arts, with mixed martial arts fighter, right? Because they will always win. I think to be able to do what we do, you need to be good at in several disciplines at the same time. So you cannot just say, okay, well, I'm a biologist, I'm not going to understand the code. I don't need that. No, you do, because otherwise you won't be able to work with it. You won't trust it. Same for medical doctors, right? So many of them are asking, okay, is it clinically validated? Well, guys, you know what? To clinically validate that, it would take 5 years, right? So you need to deeply understand it, understand how to use it maybe outside the regulatory environment, and then look at ways to introduce this into clinical practice. Like, for example, you know, we recently launched those AI-based aging clocks, and we're trying to educate the physicians on that. And unless you give them some kind of certificate and a course, they won't even like learn about it. They'll say, oh, okay, give me a protocol, right? And then I'll work with it. No, you have to be curious. You need to become an MMA fighter where you understand the AI component, but also your domain expertise. So we are interested in very curious people. And, you know, very often what I see in Hong Kong, for example, people saying, oh, it's outside my profession. I don't know how to do that. Well, you know what? Google. Learn how to Google and learn how to do things even if you don't have the skills, right? Because right now, all this information is available. Just learn how to Google.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that echoes a lot of the educational pedagogy that we have at Accelerate when we're training thousands of people to be equipped with the skills of the future. It's not about memorization or being able to regurgitate a certain algorithm by its name or its model accuracy as much as the ability to synthesize new information, which leads me to my last question before I start to bring questions from the audience. Alex and Stratos, there are tons of papers and tons of technologies coming out every day. What are your methodologies to filtering the noise from the signal? You know, there's a new paper every day, and even if you both had a little neural network inside of you, which you do, but like a AI-based neural network to be able to read all those papers, it'd still be a lot. So, you know, what are your sort of methodologies, your frameworks, intellectual frameworks to synthesize all the new stuff, the noise versus the signal? And any of you can get started.
Well, I
Alex,
guess here
go ahead.
I mean, we publish one paper every couple weeks, at least nowadays, right? So we also generate quite a bit of content and I guess quite a bit of noise. And it's all about experience. You just need to start reading papers and learning which ones are, you know, higher priority and higher importance to your field. So we do at Insilico, for example, at least 3 rounds of literature reviews every week. So and now there are the great tools that we have developed, but of course there is Google Scholar that basically sorts those papers by relevance. So you might want to create your own Scholar or sign on ResearchGate, right? And ResearchGate also prioritizes some of those papers reasonably well. And it's especially relevant in the context of COVID, because nowadays, you know, from what I see, it's at least 10% of all known drugs have already been suggested for repurposing, for example. And ResearchGate created a system for reviewing those papers and identifying, you know, the most interesting ones. So many of those resources already have algorithms for prioritization. And of course, you need to look at the ones that are relevant to your field and are in high impact journals, preferably peer reviewed over, you know, it's not just a few days in peer review, right? So you need to look at the dates. You need to look at who is publishing, right? If it's just some lower credibility scientists, you might want to, you know, look at the paper twice. If it is coming from a very good lab, usually it's a good idea to take a look at the paper. But again, that comes from experience. It's important to just start literature reviews in your circle.
Alex, in defense of some scientists that they're not from very big labs, I want to say sometimes big labs also make very good stories, but the contribution is not too big at the same time. So I want to keep a balance. I want to keep a balance between the two. So
I agree but disagree as well, because again, if it's an archive and from, you know, no-name lab somewhere, usually it would have lower credibility. Yeah.
Of course. Totally agree. I totally agree with Alex.
You know, that's the both sides of coins, right? Because, you know, I mean, 2 sides of the coin, you both see it in different ways. That's great. Did you want to add anything there, Dr. Stratos?
Actually, I mean, usually what I advise is always find me the best paper has a state-of-the-art performance that has reproducible code and the data is open. If you have these 3 things, basically, you know, we can quickly test the problem, you know, and see how feasible it is. I mean, I approach a little bit from the engineering perspective right now. Alex approaches more from the research perspective. So that's how usually I advise the engineers. Just find me this paper, spend some time, find me this paper, explain to me why this is, if it's worth it to proceed, see if it's reproducible, I mean, the code and everything. And basically if the data is available, because sometimes, you know, in this clinical, sometimes still highly cited papers, the data are not available. So of course you can see the value and you trust papers, but we cannot, maybe cannot be reproduced. So this is a big issue actually.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you again. That's some of the questions that I had, and I'd love to open to about 10 to 15 minutes of questions from the audience. So again, for all those who are listening right now, please feel free to add your questions in the chat. And I'm going to get started with the first question we have from a gentleman called Jose. And Jose is asking, Dr. Alex and Dr. Stratos, it's really great to hear that you're making doctors collaborate with AI and enhance their knowledge and performance. How do you see AI being accepted by senior citizens, and what can we do to make them more open to it?
It's basically, you know, saving the drowning is in the hands of the drowning, right? So we we need them to be very motivated to get into this field, right? And if they're motivated, we will ensure that we put every effort to get them into AI. So nowadays there are lots of opportunities for lifelong learning, lifelong career planning. So if the person is motivated, they would be able to, you know, go and take university courses, or there are courses on Coursera. And there are, you know, hundreds and hundreds of resources online that allow you to do it cheaply or free to get into this field, to learn about it. It's all about the motivation. And my advice is that, you know, what we need to figure out is how to make people believe that they can still do it and be friendly with technology. It's a common problem. And for that, my recommendation is just to learn and study the social emotional selectivity theory, which basically states that the longer you expect to live, the younger you are going to behave. And we just need to convince people that, you know, the retirement age is much further than they're currently planning, and start just being friendly with technology for the rest of their life.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Actually, what I want to add on top of that, I think like is, I think if I understand the question correctly, I would say like, senior citizens will be using AI, even if they don't understand that. So it will use it, it will be running in the back end, things that, you know, so whether they will accept it or not, this will be another thing, but they will be using it. I believe they will start accepting it when they realize that they're using it for quite some time. So I think they will be, and then there will be that point that say, oh, I'm using AI all this time, for example, or on this and this and this X, Y, Z. When they realize that, on too many applications, I feel then they might start building trust or something they wouldn't before. So simple as that. That's how I see it.
Fantastic. We have another question from a individual, from a lady called Nisha. And Nisha is asking you both, what has been the greatest setback you've experienced while developing your technology, and how did you overcome it?
I can answer that first.
Yeah, sure.
So actually the greatest setback, I mean, like, I guess it's a problem, what you mean, like, right, the issue, right?
Yeah, an obstacle, something that held you back.
Yeah.
Maybe a failure, a mini failure of sorts.
I mean, for me, I think like in my previous job, the biggest challenge, I was working in a startup, was basically bring basically the technology next to the user. It was actually a huge challenge, and it takes time. I understand. It's not a problem of the company. It's not a problem of it's the market. It's the healthcare industry. It takes time to be adopted. So that's why I think we put a lot of efforts, try to play around, stay close to the user, and try to fit the user, fit the application as much as possible to the user needs. Basically becoming closer to consulting rather than building a product. Because in the beginning, you really have to, let's say, overfit a little bit your solution to the customer, to the specific customer in turn to do some proof of concepts. I would say that's how we try to move forward in this obstacle. Alex? Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll take this question, and I apologize, I need to run. I have 2 more meetings in parallel. at 3 p.m. my time. So our biggest setback, and I think for everybody in our field, is experimental validation. So you can do a lot in the algorithmic space, right? And come up with brilliant ideas, brilliant, retrospective validation. You'll be able to prove that, your molecule is great, it's beautiful, chemists would look at it, they will like it. Then you would do in vitro validation, even go in vivo. But after that, somewhere you would be able to see that, biology is so much more complex than you expect, and you would fail. And that would, so you need to prepare for failures when you're working in bio AI. And you are gonna have a lot of that. You're gonna have more of that than successes. So that's something that always sets us back. Another big setback is, if you're wearing the rosy glasses and you're thinking that, you're going to develop something cool and come to big pharma and they're gonna partner with you quickly, well, that's not gonna happen. Yeah, so prepare for, like, if they get excited and if you really are addressing their need, and if you're really if you develop something really amazing, it's 9 months to 12 months to sign a contract. And usually it would start with a pilot anyway, and sometimes there's going to be a death by pilot. So make sure you allocate your chips wisely when working with big pharma, and go for projects that really matter and that have solid financial backing and are not dependent on management changes or take too much time in legal. So yeah, it's prepare for long cycles if you're getting into bio AI. It's not going to be just it's not IT, and it's actually not even medicine. In medicine, things are quicker than in drug discovery. So our biggest setbacks were just failed expectations on the speed.
Yeah, totally get it.
And I will need to sign off. Sincere apologies. Yeah. So I'll leave you in the careful hands of Stratos. I know he is one of the thought leaders here in Hong Kong.
We can
you
conclude
just
here,
write your email addresses then? Why don't we conclude here? And then if you both could just write your email addresses, then we will just, we'll just wrap up here. Fantastic. So thank you again to everyone. This was a fantastic panel, and a recording of this will be on the Accelerate YouTube channel. Feel free to reach out to myself or Dr. Stratos or Dr. Alex about further questions. And we're really inspired to have more and more of you enter the space and make a major impact and a major difference. So thank you again all, and stay safe and stay happy and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.